Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We generally do a couple of webinars a month. Sometimes they're just overviews of ClubExpress for people that are either very new to ClubExpress or evaluating ClubExpress as an association management solution. And some of them are new version announcements, and most of them are deep dives into particular pieces of functionality, whether they be built into ClubExpress or options. And we've also been doing a series of role-based webinars, and today is one of those. We've done one for ClubExpress for treasurers, or ClubExpress for webmasters, or ClubExpress for membership chairmen. And today, Samantha is going to be presenting ClubExpress for club and association secretaries. Let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping. All of the phones and microphones are muted, so questions should be entered into the chat window. We'll revisit the chat questions at the end of the demonstration to see if there's anything that Samantha hasn't already covered. And this is particularly useful for anybody who is viewing a recording of the webinar. You can reach our recordings. One of the easiest ways is to go to clubexpress.com and click on the Cool Stuff page, and then click on the Webinars tab, and you'll see a schedule of upcoming webinars, and you'll see the recorded webinars, so you can reach them there. And just above the Webinars tab is a Video Tutorials tab. If you click on that, you will come to a list of recent video tutorials, and they're much more succinct than the webinars and very well worth viewing, and you may pick up a couple of tips. And all of our webinars and tutorials are actually stored on YouTube. So if you're viewing them on YouTube, you can click the subscribe button and optionally on the notification bell. So that way you can be notified anytime new content is posted. And finally, if you're using ClubExpress, and particularly if ClubExpress is working really well for you, we'd appreciate it if you would go to clubexpress.com/reviews and click on one of these review sites and leave a review so other people that are evaluating association management solutions can have the benefit of how ClubExpress is working for your organization. So Samantha, why don't you share your screen?
So, hi everyone. Thanks again for taking the time today for our session. Today's going to spotlight secretaries. So, one of the things that I noticed as I was going through and preparing for today's webinar is that secretaries kind of seemed like the backbone and the glue that keeps everything together within your organization. They seemed to touch a lot of areas and have a hand in a lot of different spaces within your organization. So, what we're going to talk about today are the three main areas that I thought that secretaries would really be focusing on. That's managing your members, managing your officers and your organization. So managing committees and managing who's at the head of all of the different departments within your organization, membership director, treasurer, communications director, and then also managing communication. So like I said, it seemed like secretaries were bouncing in a lot of different areas. So hopefully today's session will glue all of that together in the same way that secretaries seem to glue those organizations together. Now, in our demo today, the first thing that we're going to talk about is managing members and the things that you'll touch when you're managing the members of your organization. We'll talk about People Manager versus our People Lookup tool and what the difference is between the two, how to use committees to really make it easier for other officers within your organization to do their own work, and of course, easier for you to do your own work as well, and surveys that you can use to communicate with your members and to either get information out there or get information from your members. So what I'm going to do is pop over to our demo club, and I'm signed in as Martin Smith. Martin Smith is an administrator of the Northwest Balloon Club. And like all of our overview webinars that we've done in the past, we won't do a deep dive into these features. We do deep dives in our webinars and our tutorials, but in this case, we're just going to give you an idea, a bird's eye view of everything that you should be focusing on within your role as a secretary. So I'm going to pop into the control panel, which of course is the back end of your website. That's where you're going to access all of the databases and functions that we'll talk about today. And the first thing that I mentioned is managing members. So I'm going to go into the People tab and we'll talk about those two main tools that you can use to access your member database. The People Manager under Admin Functions, and right next to it, the People Lookup tool. So our People Manager is a really wonderful way that you can access information about your members. Everything is all in one place. It has a great search function right at the top that's visible as soon as you visit the People Manager. Of course, at the top, by default, your search is always going to be set to active and expired members only. I can search through non-members and search through my non-member database, or I can search through both at the same time. Now, within the People Manager, you're going to be able to do a lot of different things with your member database. You can send individual communications to those members. You can view their own contact information in their member profile by selecting the edit icon. You can set up mailing list categories that apply to each of those members and even non-members. And those things are going to be useful not just to you when you are looking to communicate with your members, but they're also going to be useful to a lot of other officers within your organization. Setting up those mailing list categories, making sure contact information is up to date, all of that is just going to feed into not just your role, but the roles of others in your organization as well. You can also use the People Manager to add notes to individual member records. So you'll see here at the very top, I have Audrey's record that has this little Post-it note icon with a green plus sign. Underneath that, though, it looks like none of the other members have that. That's our member notes icon. And the green plus sign indicates that that particular member has notes associated with their account. Now, those are administrative only notes, which means that the member can never actually see those. As soon as you add a note to it and save it, that red circle that you see turns into a green plus sign. So it's a great way to keep tabs on things going on with your members, maybe keep a record of anything that they've done for your organization so you can refer back to it, any questions they may have asked. You also have the ability, of course, to run reports on each individual member. These reports included in the People Manager are going to be your invoices and your labels. And of course, we have a bunch of other reports that are available for managing members and your databases. And we'll talk about those a little bit later in our webinar today. Now, within the People Manager, you can access all of this information about your members and your non-members, and you have sort of a lot of power in that maintain column. Now, within your own organization, it's up to you as a group to determine what level of access each person should have, what level of access you get as a secretary, as a membership director, as a communications director. So if this seems like a little bit too much for what you're looking to do, maybe you don't need to have access to all of this information. Maybe you don't need to be able to view that member's profile. Maybe you just need basic contact information, but you still want this robust search feature. Let's pop back into our control panel and take a look at what the People Lookup tool offers. So the People Lookup tool is essentially the exact same thing, just without all of that extra administrative access. So if you are wondering what database is the best to give your secretary access to, or even just as a secretary, what do you think you need? The People Lookup tool might be for you. I still am able to view all of the contact information that I need to reach out to that member. I'm still able to use all of the same search features within the People Manager. I just don't have the ability to add member notes, access payment information, access additional member data questions, any of the items that are associated with the People Manager. So thinking about access and what you need to make your job easier, taking a look at those two tools and really evaluating which one is right for you. Now, still in the People tab, one of the modules that you likely would spend a lot of time dealing with would be committees. So within our website modules section, I'm going to visit our committees module. And because I'm currently in edit mode, when I select that committees link, remember, it's going to take me to the back end of the committees module where I'm actually configuring the module itself. If I want to view what my members might see if I placed the committees module on the front end of my website on the menu, I just select that switch to view mode icon. Now, when I select the committees link, it would take me to the front end. Again, what my members are going to see when they access it. So I'll switch back to edit mode and I'll select committees. Now, you can set up as many committees as you'd like within your own site. Now, our demo site is set up as a club that has chapters. You may not see this particular feature. Now, within this page, I can set up committees within a specific chapter, district, or region. You may only have the ability to set up committees for your entire organization if it's not configured that way. So let's go ahead and take a look at all of our committees. We have a few and we have members in a few as well. Now, when you're setting up committees, you can add as many members as you'd like to them. You can even select a bunch of other options to sort of make the process a little bit easier for yourself, to streamline the process for yourself. When you create a committee, you enter the name and the purpose. You can associate custom pages with that particular committee. So that might be a chance for you to coordinate with your content creator, your webmaster, to set up those custom pages for those committees to perhaps talk about the mission of the committee or the work that the committee is doing. You can, of course, create subcommittees. And underneath that, we have visibility settings. We can show the member list and we can show member photos. So of course, every member has the opportunity to include a photo of themselves in their member profile, and it just makes it easier for the rest of your organization to put a face with a name. And at the bottom, we have some more detailed configuration options. If you want to limit membership, track terms of office, and whether or not members can add and remove themselves. Now, committees aren't just going to be useful to you to tell you what group is working on what project, or even to tell your members who sits on a committee. Committees are going to be used across your site by a lot of other members of your organization, a lot of other officers, because you're able to use committees to do things like set up folders in your document library based and allow just that committee to access that folder. You can set up email distribution lists to send a communication out to just members of that committee. There are a lot of different ways that committees sort of reverberate throughout your site. So setting up committees, adding that membership to committees, maintaining those committees, that's going to be really important. When you are thinking about your site, just remember that because everything is built in, it really allows everything to talk to each other. So you may be used to having your own role and having your own way of doing things and not really coordinating with a lot of other folks in your organization. But again, because everything is built in, our modules and our databases all talk to each other. So there really is a chance for you to collaborate with other officers within your organization to find out what's going to make your job easier and what's going to make theirs easier as well. Now, the last thing that we'll touch on as it relates to managing your members is going to take us to our communications tab. In our communications tab, we of course have all of our built-in communication tools and databases, as well as all of those great modules. Surveys are a great way to reach out to members, to gather information from them, to really figure out what your members need from you, and even to announce things. You can use surveys and polls for things like an election. You can use them as member feedback. Now, if I take a look at any surveys that have been created, we only have a few. We have a couple of polls and a couple of different surveys. A couple of things that you can do with surveys. They can be as long as you'd like. When you add a survey, you're setting up some basic info, who the survey is for. If you want to categorize your surveys, of course, at ClubExpress, we love categories. So whenever you're touching a module, you're likely adding categories to that module. Sometimes those categories are accessed by just you as administrators or coordinators. They're really just used for you to organize things on the back end of your site. And sometimes those categories are visible to your members. For example, in the event calendar, categories that you set up for events are used not just by you to categorize your events, but they're also things that your members can use to search your event calendar. In this case, we can set up categories for surveys, change the close method. We can ask members for the first 50 responses. We can choose an end date for those surveys as well. If we want to allow anonymous responses or allowing members to vote multiple times, and choose a contact person for that survey as well. You'll also notice that we have an option to configure a survey as an election. Now, what that does is it basically presets a couple of things for your survey. It makes anonymous responses required. So all of your voting would be anonymous. And it does not allow a user to vote more than once. So in a true election style, users are voting in an anonymous way and they can vote only one time. So you may have been used to handling elections a separate way. Maybe you handle elections in person at maybe a yearly meeting that you have with your organization. But of course, because elections are built into your site, you're able to offer that online, maybe expand that voting process for your organization, give your members a little bit more time to vote for whomever they might be voting for. And of course, you can create polls and add those polls to other pages of your site. Now, another thing to note, we have several different question and answer types that you can use when you are creating a survey. So if I take a look at any one of our surveys that we have here, I have a list of pages and questions that I can add. Like I said, you can add as many pages to this survey as you'd like. The survey can be 3 minutes, it can be 30 minutes. And when I add a question, I see all of the different answer types that I can select. We have over a dozen different answer types. All of them can be configured by you. Some of the more common ones are towards the bottom of the list. For example, a select list, which is what you're looking at right now. Radio buttons, checkbox listed. You can, of course, include scale questions, which would be great for a member satisfaction survey. So keeping in mind that you have all of these tools and that it's, again, all built into your site, you're able to run reports on any surveys and polls, view those results. All of that is completely built into your site. And again, we aren't going through a full tutorial on how to use these items. We do have other tutorials and webinars that cover these items in much more detail. This is to give you an overview of the items that you might use in your day-to-day or month-to-month life in your role within your organization. So we talked about managing members. Now, what about managing the officers and your organization itself? Committees, what can they be used for? So we talked about how committees kind of reverberate throughout the rest of your site. You can set up forums based on committee membership. We have email distribution lists set up for committee membership, and you can use committees to set up document library folders. So they're a really useful way to organize members and officers on the back end of your site, even if you don't produce that committee list for the world to see, even if you don't add it to a menu, it can still be really useful to you and your job. We're going to talk about administrators and coordinators and how you're going to manage those, managing your titles and your contacts so that your members are able to contact the right people. We'll take a look at our document library, how you would add your joining agreement to your website, and events. And when you're setting up events like a committee meeting, what are some of the things that you should look out for? So let's pop right back into our site here. We did speak about committees. They're used for forums. Again, when we add a forum, we can add a forum based just on committee membership, which means that whenever someone adds themselves to a committee or removes themselves from a committee, they're able to automatically be assigned to a forum. So if we take a look at our add forum page and we select committee members, we're then asked to choose. Of course, this particular site is set up as a site with subgroups. You may not be asked to choose your organization level. And then, of course, we have a list of all of the different committees. So, like I said, it's all built in and everything talks to everything else within your website. Now, let's go back into the control panel and talk about managing those officers. So, we're going to talk about your administrators, your coordinators, your titles, and your contacts, and they all kind of go together. All of those items are going to be found in the Club tab. Now, the Club tab is the fourth tab from the left. It may be labeled something different depending on what your organization has decided to call you. You could be a league, you could be an association, you could be a group. It's really up to your organization to decide. So the first stop that I'll make is all the way down at the bottom under administrators and coordinators. Now, there are a handful of other places on your website that you can set up coordinators. For example, I can use the configure icon in the control panel to set up coordinators for the functions that you see in each tab. And we, of course, have a video on how to use the new control panel that we released several months ago. And that goes through that process. There are some items within your site that will allow you to set up a coordinator within that particular database or module. For example, in custom pages, I can give someone coordinator rights to all of my custom pages or just one. Using this function is one of my favorites. It lays everything out for you in a really nice way, and it allows you to really look at the full view of your website to determine what different members are going to need access to. Now, I'll give you a quick overview of the difference between an administrator and a coordinator. An administrator is someone who's going to have full access to the back end of your site. So everything that you see me doing today, an administrator is able to do also. You have to have at least one administrator. You can have more than one. We usually recommend that you keep that group pretty tight because those folks have access to everything. It's really easy to end up having too many cooks in the kitchen. That's one of the reasons why you have the ability to set up coordinators. Now, a coordinator is someone who has access to just the functions that you assign to them. You can pick and choose any functions that you'd like, and you can remove those rights at any time. Now, if I add a coordinator, the screen that appears for me is my assign coordinator functions screen. At the very top, I use my member selector to choose the member that I want to add to this site. And then you'll notice that everything listed on the rest of this page is laid out in kind of the same way that our control panel is laid out. So again, it gives you a full view of everything on the back end of your site. So let's say you are setting up your treasurer. You're making sure they have access to everything that they need access to. For the most part, a lot of the functions are going to be in the Money tab. I can quickly check every single one of these functions. And then maybe there are a handful of other things the treasurer should have access to. Perhaps they need access to emailing, maybe also bad emails so that they can take stock of what information is not getting to those particular members because their email address isn't correct within the system. And again, it gives you that full bird's eye view of your whole website so that you can drill down and make sure that the right people have access to the right things. Now, if we go back into our control panel, again, still in the Club tab, let's talk about titles. And we do have a tutorial available on titles and our Contact Us page as they go hand in hand. So let me show you what they're used for and the differences between the two and how they talk to each other. If I go into our titles page, what's going to display for me is a list of the titles that I have configured within my organization. To add a title, I'm configuring just a couple of things. The name of that particular title. So perhaps your club president is not called your president. Maybe they're called something else, but they serve as the president. So I could name that title, whatever it's named within your organization, and choose what that person serves as it relates to your site. Now, where this comes in handy is there are a lot of communications that are automatic that go to and from those particular members of your organization. For example, your membership director can be set up to receive an email or a notification every time someone signs up and or renews. Our system won't know who to send that email to unless you configure the membership director title within your organization and assign a person to that title. And the same is true for your treasurer. You can set up your website to automatically notify the treasurer whenever someone makes a payment. And of course, our system needs to know who the treasurer is to make that happen. So on this page, all you're doing is creating that title. And if your title has an email address associated with it, that stays with the title, not with the person. So whoever comes in that seat year after year uses the same email address, include that email address here. And that's the email address that you have the opportunity to use for all of those communications. Now, once I've added the titles, you'll see here that I don't really have a place to say who sits in that title. That's going to be done on the Contact Us screen. Now, the Contact Us screen is also one of the items that you would likely place on your menu. So you can see at the very top on our menu bar, we do have our Contact Us page available to members. And of course, you'd likely also want it to be available to non-members as well. So making sure to put that item on both your public and your member menu is key. That might be another opportunity for you to work with your webmaster to make sure that page is available. So if I go into our Contact Us feature, and I add a contact from scratch, I'm choosing the member at the very top, and then I'm presented with a drop down list of the titles that I configured. This is where I'm associating one of my members with that title. And then I choose what contact information I want to show for that particular officer, whether it's to be shown to everyone or to members only, and which email address. Remember, we were able to include a title email address. You can also just use the member's email address as well. So that's really the way that you can organize everyone on the back end. Now, once you've set up your administrators and coordinators, there might be a couple of extra things that you want to take a look at. For example, maybe you set up a lot of different coordinators, and every 6 months or a year, you like to take stock of who has access to what item on your site. So we do have built-in reports that allow you to view who has access to which items on your site. Now, for that, I'm visiting the website tab and I'm going to select the reports option. And you're going to want the group website security. I can view my website security by function or by member. Function would give me the function title and who has access to that function. Or I can view site security by member to view that member and everything they have access to. Now, each of those reports are going to be helpful for you, especially as your site grows. You're going to be using a lot of helping hands, a lot of volunteers, and you might have a couple of people who helped out with something and they're not doing that job anymore. And you want to make sure that whoever has access to those items is up to date at all times. So doing an audit of your site, while it seems like it's just one more thing that you have to add to your to-do list, we make it really easy with that report. And you can go right back into the club tab and edit those access points that those coordinators might have, or even changing your administrators. So one of the things that we see a lot when we send out our reminder email about our webinars is that a lot of the administrators that are being contacted are no longer with those organizations. So taking stock, double checking that anyone listed on your website as an administrator is still actually in that role. Maybe they've changed roles within your organization and then they no longer need that much access, or perhaps they're no longer with your organization at all, and you want to make sure that they don't have access to that moving forward. Let's pop back into our control panel and talk a little bit more about some of the modules that you can use, not only to help you, but to help your officers. And I've talked a lot about our document library, which is accessed through the website tab. The document library, of course, is going to be where you can house an unlimited number of documents. We don't place a limit on the number of documents that you can have. You create folders and subfolders. So right now we have a committees folder. And within the committees folder, we have a subfolder set up for one of our committees. So let's go ahead and add another subfolder. So when I add a subfolder, I'm entering the subfolder name, and that could be just pairing with the name of the committee. It's a subfolder of my committees folder, and I can select the visibility option. Now, visibility is where you're going to determine who has access to this folder and who doesn't. Now, you can say that the folder itself is visible to everyone, but only members can download the documents in the folder. That would mean that your members, if they're not on that committee, can see that there's a bylaws committee folder, but they'll see that the folder is blank. If a member is part of that committee and they navigate to that folder, they'll actually see the documents within that folder. So it's your login that's going to determine who you are and what that means as far as your access. Whenever you sign in, whatever you're supposed to have access to is instantly before you. So if I select members of a committee, again, because all of our modules are talking to each other, I then just go ahead and select my bylaws committee. I can choose whether or not members can upload documents to that particular folder. And these, of course, would just be the members who have access to that folder. So if you manage all of your committee documents, you're managing those agendas, you're managing those minutes, you might want to keep it as not allowed administrators only, meaning that only you or another administrator would be able to add those documents. If you have access to the document library as a coordinator, remember that administrators would be allowed to add those documents as well. So taking a look at who has access, taking a look at what information is going to be added to that particular folder is really important. You can, of course, allow people to add documents to a folder with approval. So everything would still go before your eyes before it's live on your website. Whether or not you'd like to show the folder on the website, that might seem like a no-brainer, but remember that you have access to your document library from the back end of your site. So if you only wanted that folder to be accessible from the back end, almost like a shared document folder, you can uncheck this box and it won't ever appear on the front end of your site. Those members with access to that folder would only be able to see it by accessing the document library from the back end in the control panel. Now, of course, all of the documents that you add into your document library can be linked to via email. So when we talk about communications, we'll talk about how you can maybe send out that agenda or send out those meeting minutes to those committee members. Let's talk about the joining agreement. Now, the joining agreement is something that you likely would have added right when you set up your website, or maybe your implementation engineer added it and you're not sure how to update it. You're not sure where it sits on your site or when your members are even seeing it. Your member joining agreement is accessed in the Club tab at the very bottom in the setup section. Now, the joining agreement is going to be something that you can include in the member sign up wizard. I can edit my text. This is our formatted text editor. I can use this to craft my joining agreement. Of course, either a new joining agreement that you have or one that you've used for years. It's where you'll update it. And this would involve coordinating with your membership director because, again, the joining agreement is something that you can allow your new and renewing members to view when they're signing up with your organization. So coordinating with your membership director, making sure that they've added the member joining agreement to part of the sign up wizard so that you're able to just collect that your members have read and agreed to that joining agreement. And of course, you can update that at any time throughout the life of your website. Next up, let's talk about events. So one of the things that you likely do as a secretary is set up different events, different meetings, perhaps committee meetings. So in the website tab, we'll pop into our event calendar module. And what we're going to do is just take a look at a handful of different things. We're not going to go through the entire process of creating an event. We have plenty of tutorials that cover creating an event and managing different events. But what I want to do is take a look at one of the options that we have. So if I take a look at our safety committee meeting towards the center of your screen here, I've added it to my category of committee meetings. So again, you have members of different committees that are maybe members of several different committees across your organization. They want to pop into your event calendar and view just when they have committee meetings coming up. They can filter their search just by that category. So if I go into edit this particular event, there are a handful of different things to keep an eye out for. Under basic information, one of the first things that you'll configure when you're adding an event is who the event is for, limiting attendance to that subgroup. Again, if you have different groups within your organization, different subgroups, you can limit the visibility to just those subgroups. So keeping in mind, if you're setting up committee meetings, especially if you're setting up committee meetings for subgroups, to make sure that your visibility is going to match that committee that you're adding a meeting for. Who it's visible to. And right away, I see that option again to filter visibility just to my committee. So I can select visible to committee and check all of the committees if it's open to everyone who sits on a committee or just one specific committee that particular meeting is for. And to take that one step further, if we take a look at our who can register page, our registrant types can also be configured to just allow committee members. So even if you want to display your committee meetings on your calendar for members, you want your members to be able to see how often the committee meets. Perhaps if that's one of the deciding factors of them actually joining that committee, they can see, oh, this committee meets once a week. That's a little bit too much for me. But this other committee meets once a month. I think I can handle that. So you can make the entire event or the meeting visible to everyone, but keep that registration close to your vest, keep it just to those committee members. And the way that I would do that, if we just take a look at how this particular item has been configured by editing it, I've selected members of a selected committee and then chosen that particular committee. I can also change the display name. So I can say that I'd like this to be committee members only. and update it. Now, whenever someone goes to register for that particular event or meeting, they'll see that it's open to committee members only. I can even choose to add another committee. If I'm opening this up to other committees as well, I have my safety committee. Now, once I select members of a selected committee, I can choose between the committees that I've already configured and add them to the list of available registrants. What that means is that anyone outside of those groups that you've added to the Who Can Register page won't be able to register for that event. Now, let's talk about some of our communication features. Now, for that, I want to stay in my event calendar just for a second because there are a couple of things within every event that might be helpful for you. First things first, every event can have an attendance list with it. So, when I'm in my registration and fees page, I have the ability to mark that I would like to track attendance. And what that does for me, if I go back into my committee meeting admin panels, is that I have the ability to mark attendance based on registrants. It's going to give me a list of everyone who's registered with a checkbox next to it that allows me to mark them as having attended that meeting. I also have a lot of different reports available for every single event. So some of these might be useful for other types of events, but you also have things like name tags, event meeting attendance. I can print out mailing labels. I can include company information with those attendees. There are a lot of different reports. Make sure to play around with them and find the one that suits your particular needs. If you're asking questions from an event, if you are responsible for adding not just committee meetings to your event calendar, but also regular events as well, taking a look at those reports because they're really going to be able to help you. And then, of course, we have blast emailing built into our event calendar. Now, our event calendar blast emailing feature is going to function the exact same way as blast emailing access from the communications tab. But there are a couple of other little extras that we include for you when you access emailing through the event. So to show you those, I'm just going to quickly add an emailing. And again, we have other tutorials that talk about how to create emailings and how emailings work within an event. Now, if I take a look at my distribution list options by selecting Edit Distribution List, and I view that list of ClubExpress created distribution lists, the first couple dozen are all just related to this event. So when you're looking to communicate with your members, with registrants, with really anyone, taking a look at everything that we've basically done for you, because remember, everything is connected. Your event calendar is connected to the exact same database that your blast emailing feature is connected to. So we're able to do this. You're able to really harness the power of your site and use it to your advantage. Now, speaking of emailings, we'll, of course, pop back into our control panel and we'll take a look at our communications tab and our emailing feature. Now, within emailing, of course, you have all of those really great distribution lists that you have access to. And just to show you, when I go to my distribution list settings for a regular emailing, I don't see all of those event-related distribution lists. I'm only seeing the built-in distribution lists that we offer. Of course, there are dozens. And to highlight, one of the ones that we have access to is members of a selected committee. You can also select members in a discussion forum, members in an interest group. Use the distribution lists. Remember that you're able to add and compound different groups to create a distribution list that works for you, and also exclude certain members from any emails that you've created. So another thing to take note is adding attachments to your emails. So we talked about the ability to add those documents to your document library so that you're able to keep track of them. You can also, of course, send them out. So what I'm going to do is show you a couple of different ways that you can do that. I'm going to add a column of text here and use my content editor to add in a link to that document. Now, if you're not familiar with our content editor, it's something that's used across your site in a lot of different places. What I want you to focus on this time is this link builder icon. Now, the link builder is another item that you're going to be using across your website. And that link builder is your key to not just linking to things outside of your site, but also linking to things within your site. So if I want to link to a document, I choose that I'd like to link to a document, I select the folder, and then I select the specific document within that folder. I can link to it via text, via a button, or an image. Another way that you're able to include items like that in your emailing is just by adding over our link button, or of course, attaching a file. There we go, attaching a file. Again, all of these items are drag and drop. So all you have to do is drag it over to your email. You can even utilize the templates. So if you want to be able to send out a sort of standard email every time a meeting or an event has concluded, you have the ability to do that. You can create a template, create that email one time, and drag the template over every single time you want to send that email out. And of course, we have a lot of other tutorials that cover creating email templates and using them. So what these things are going to do, save you time. You're putting a lot of time in to set everything up, to set up those folders, to set up those committees. But over time, you're going to save yourself time by making sure that everything's been set up on the back end so that you can use it going forward to make your job even easier. Now, speaking of communications and emailing, we'll pop back into our control panel and talk about our bad email feature. So one of the things that was probably really difficult prior to switching to a full website would be managing your contact list, managing your databases. And your bad email list is a really great way to double check whether or not members are receiving your emails. Every time an email communication gets sent out, we keep track of what happens to that. We keep track of whether or not it actually made it to that person. Was there some sort of failure? You have the ability to correct that failure on your end so that you can make sure that those members are receiving your communications. You also have the ability to contact those members. Remember, we have access to your members' contact information, so you can reach out to them to let them know that there's a problem with their email address. And of course, we don't just put the onus on you. When your member signs in and they visit their member profile, if there is a problem with their email address, we notify them within their member profile in bright red text to let them know that their email address seems to be invalid. So they're able to correct that on their end. And then let's talk about one more item in the communications tab, and then we'll talk about some of the other reports that might be useful to you. At the very bottom of our communications tab, we have an option called system emails. This is a list of all of those boilerplate emails that you and your members might see whenever something happens on your site. So whenever someone makes a donation, when they submit a form, when they respond to a survey, register for an event, most of these can be edited by you. So if you just don't like the way the email is laid out, if you're not crazy about the way that it's formatted or the information that it gives, we give you the option to edit any of those emails. You can edit it because you don't like the cadence. Maybe your organization is a little bit more friendly and you want your emails to be friendly as well. Maybe you're part of a professional association and you'd like your emails to be a little more professional, a little more corporate. You can change the email as much as you'd like. You can change the tags, add links, add photos, add a banner. You can do whatever you'd like. And then let's talk about some of the reports that we have available to you. We already talked about some of the reports that you see in the People Manager, the reports that you have in the website tab to keep track of all of the officers within your organization. So what about some of the other reports? Well, in our People tab, and I'm still just in the People tab, I'm not going to go back into the People Manager. I'm going to take a look at the reports that are available to me. We have contact information reports, mailing labels that you can use, both US mailing labels and international mailing labels, and membership info reports. So within each of these categories are dozens of additional specific reports that you can run. You can run them in any format that you'd like. So if I select that I'd like my contact information, so name, and I move through, I can, again, our site is set up to have subgroups. If you have subgroups, you're able to filter out the contact list by subgroup. If not, you'll skip this page. You won't ever see it. So I'm just going to say that I'd like to see all of my members' contact information. Some of the reports that you're going to run will give you the ability to filter out your member status, member type, member levels. And then, of course, the final page that you'll see is the report output page, choosing the output that works for you. A PDF, that's pretty self explanatory. That would be great for emailing back and forth. HTML is my personal favorite. If I don't actually need to send that report to someone, all it does is open that report up in a new tab in your browser. It's my lazy hack. If I just need to get a count of something, or if I just need to access some information quickly, I don't have to download anything and open up that file from my downloads. It just opens up right in my browser. Next up, you can use a CSV output to export that information as an Excel spreadsheet. It won't look pretty, but you'll get all of the information that you need sorted completely in every column, and you'll be able to use Excel's features for formatting to make the report look a little bit better. And of course, you can use those filter and sorting options to further filter out the report that you need. And those output options are available for all of the reports that we have. The filter options, filtering by member status, member level, those may not be available in every report, but the outputs certainly are. And of course, with our mailing labels, every mailing label includes the mailing label type or size as it's been configured. So all of those are visible to you before you even select the report. Alan, how are we doing on questions?
We have several questions. Some are actually, I think, suggestions for things that would be pretty good. Question is, can a member see which committees they have been assigned to? And I had suggested that admin could go to data exports and get the data, but a member can see what interest groups they have, but I don't know that a member can see which committees they've been assigned to.
They unfortunately can't, but that is a really good suggestion to have that added as a feature to the member profile.
Agreed. There's a question here about, can a member send an email to all other members, kind of like a listserv? And an admin can send an email through the blast messages, and forms can be configured to send out emails. But I don't think it would be a good idea for members to just be able to send an email to every other member in an organization. Some organizations have thousands of members, and the one thing you wouldn't want to do is just let your membership just mail to everybody. But admins certainly can go to any member. And in fact, there was a question here about, can an event coordinator email to all people that are registered to attend an event? And as you showed, yes, they can. You would go into the event itself and go to the email for that event. And then not only can you go and set up an email for particular people, you could email to all those people that have registered for the event and haven't completed paying for it yet. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility once you know which it is. So all registrants who have paid for it, who have not paid for it, who have registered for a specific activity. So there's a lot of granularity there. So one question was, in titles, can we have more than one person for notification for, say, membership or treasurer? So if you go to the club and go to titles, more than one person can be listed as a membership director, it turns out. But I don't know if it will email to both of them. Do you happen to know that, Samantha?
I actually do happen to know that. Unfortunately, you will only get emails to one membership director. That is actually a feature that I have sent to our developers on behalf of another organization that requested the same thing. You can add more than one person for any title, but the email notifications are only going to go to the first person who was set up in the system as either membership director or treasurer or whoever is getting those emails.
Okay, there's a question here that says, I think I missed it, but how do you configure a title email like treasurer@clubname.com?
So that would be in email accounts.
Right.
And there are a couple of things to note about email accounts. So you can have them linked to your own domain, or we can handle email accounts for you. We did add one additional feature to blast emailing to handle the way it appears your emails are coming from your organization. If you are interested in having that set up and you have your domain already handled by ClubExpress, just giving our support team a call and making sure that that's set up, all of the emails that you send out will come from the email accounts that you have set up. If you aren't having Club Express handle the domain for your emails, there is a record that you can provide with us. It's called an SPF record, and it just allows us to send email on your behalf. So you'll notice that when blast emails go out from your organization, you might see that it's coming from your club, but in carrots, it looks like it's coming from mail2@clubexpress.com. That can be changed by just providing us with that record. Now, in the email itself, you do have the ability to change the email address that it appears as though it's coming from. So if I go back into our emailing and I add an emailing, the first option that you're going to configure would be the basic information. And that's what allows you to change the from email address and the name. Now, both of these currently are pulling from who I'm logged in as Martin Smith. So Martin Smith is the name. I've set up my own email address for Martin Smith's email address for a couple of things. So it's pulling the information of the person logged in. But I, as a secretary, maybe I'm sending out an email that's going to come from the president. So I can just back that out and say president at myclub.org and enter the name of the president. And that's what the email will look like it's coming from.
Okay, so we have a question about polls, but we have a couple of questions about polls and questions in general. Can polls and surveys be used for the general public? We sometimes do mock elections with elementary students. Can surveys be put out for those students? I think the favorite TV show has, if you click on the edit for favorite TV show, because I think that one will let you pull down availability. So
Yes.
it could be all site users, members only, or any one of these, and you allow anonymous responses and things like that. So the answer is yes. A lot of people use this stuff for elections, where you have to be members and it will accept one and only one response from you and keep it anonymous and things like that. So there's a lot of capabilities there. There was a question about how do you set up questions that are going to be used in an event? Like, do you want the chicken, fish, or vegetarian meal?
Yes. So that's going to actually be in what's really a bank of questions. So when you're going through and configuring the event, you are selecting questions from a bank of questions that you've created to pull into each individual event. What's great about that is that you can reuse those questions every single time. So if I'm in my event manager and I select the configure option and event questions, that's where I create that bank of questions that I'm choosing from every time I create that event. Now, one additional option that we added, I believe it was either in our 10.2 or 10.3 release, is the ability to link a question to something that you've already collected from your members. So if you have already collected emergency contact information in member signup, you can say, okay, I'd like the member to fill out emergency contact information because our event is whitewater rafting. But if they've already filled out that contact information in their member profile, why make them do the work twice? If you link the question to the question they've already been asked, they'll be allowed to confirm that option. It'll be auto-filled for them on the event registration screen. They can always change it if they'd like to, but it sort of just pulls that information again because everything's built into the same site. We're able to access all of those little bits and nuggets of information so that you don't have to do the same work twice.
There's a comment from someone that wanted multiple recipients to the membership status emails. So what you could do is just set up an email address, in effect, set up a member per se, that is membership at such and use that single email address, which is in effect a list, and that would go to more than one person. That's a way around it. Let's see, there were a couple of other questions regarding the title email address versus member email address. Does this mean that I can set up with me as the secretary with a club Gmail address, for example, contact us page for new member sign up, etc., but as a member in my profile with her Yahoo address to get the dues reminders, event registration, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it means. So you can have one email address that's visible to everyone in your organization as the title email address, and a separate email address that you use as a member. Because, of course, you're not just an administrator, a coordinator, a secretary, you're also a member of the organization. So you have to do some of the things members have to do as well.
There's a question here. It says, why can't reports be customized to use certain fields? I try to produce lists using first and last name separated, but some of the lists don't allow this. I have to run two reports to get the data I want formatted as I want. Well, there's two approaches on this. One is to use data exports, and you can then take the data, and there's lots and lots of fields, and then you could, using a report designer, design anything you want, because there's more than 400 reports inside of ClubExpress, and not everything that is provided does exactly what you want. But then there's this other thing called the ad hoc reporting module, which is an optional module, which costs $200 a year or $300 a year if you want to be able to schedule reports. And that lets you have tremendous flexibility. You could put in charts and graphs and set up dashboards. And we have a couple of tutorials on the ad hoc reporting module. It's not only for reporting, but for data analysis, to be able to do drill downs and cross tabulations and things like that. So if you're really into reporting, take a look at the ad hoc reporting module. That would probably be very useful for people. Can an event use the title email of an event contact instead of their actual email?
Whenever you add an event contact, it's going to use the email address that's associated with their member profile. That actually is something that I submitted to our developers because there was another organization that asked for that information to pull as well.
Okay, well, I think we've run up against the clock. I thank everybody for attending. I hope you find this useful. And for some of the people said that this was a little bit fast paced. And yes, we agree this is fast paced, especially if you're fairly new to ClubExpress. This is kind of like a fire hose. We're trying to give you an overview of the kinds of tools that are available to you and the kinds of features that are available to you, recognizing that how to do things is not as important as knowing that they are doable. So if you go back over the recording, you can actually go to a section, pause the recording, jump over to your control panel, take a look at things, come back to the recording. So you don't have to say, oh my goodness, we only have 15 seconds to review this. That's the nice thing about the recordings. You can stop it, try things, come back. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to either email or call our customer support or customer success team and ask them. These people are great at helping people better understand certain features and to document any issues that you might find and see, maybe help you with some best practices. So at the bottom of your every page is a contact us page, or at the control panel, the support tab, you can get the phone number and email address of our support team. So thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you in the next webinar.
Hi, everyone.